Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another TMA virtual conversation with the candidates who will be on the ballot in the November general election. My name is Rich Carter. I'm TMA's government affairs consultant, and I'll be the moderator for today's briefing. I'm joined today by TMA news editor Fran Eaton, and our special guest today is Catalina Lauf, who bested 5 other candidates in the Republican primary for the 11th Congressional District and will face incumbent Democratic Congressman Bill Foster in the November 8th general election. Good morning, Fran and Catalina.
Good morning, Rich.
Hi.
With hundreds of county, state, and federal candidates on the ballot in Northern Illinois in November, TMA members and their employees are in a great position to help decide who will represent them in Springfield and Washington, D.C. going forward. Knowing what's at stake, TMA reached out to some of the candidates and requested their participation in individual virtual briefings with TMA members. Today is our second briefing, and more are scheduled in the weeks leading up to the November 8th election. We're going to spend the next half hour having a conversation with Catalina Lauf to learn her background, why she's running for Congress, and how she can help TMA members thrive and create good paying jobs for the people of Northern Illinois. Now, I'll turn it over to TMA news editor Fran Eaton, who will introduce our special guest, give her a few minutes to tell us why she's running for Congress, and ask her the first few questions. At the end of the program, TMA members will have an opportunity to ask written questions of our guests by typing them into the Q&A tab on the Zoom control panel. The floor is yours, Fran.
Thanks so much, Rich. And we're so honored to have today Catalina Lauf, who is running as a Republican in the 11th Congressional District. It's a new district. It's got a lot of interesting adjustments to it. We are excited about having heard from the congressman yesterday. And so today we're going to hear from the challenger. And Catalina Lauf has an exciting background. Her history is interesting. And I think we'll find it how she identifies with us as the TMA members as far as small and mid-sized manufacturers and just the challenges of running a business in the state of Illinois. Welcome, Catalina, and we're so happy. Could you just give us your perspective, a little bit about your background from your perspective and why you're running for Congress?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here and for all the participants that want to learn. It's nice to have a platform and an ability to really speak about our values and our issues as candidates, and so that ultimately you know who's an advocate for you and what you all do. So I'm Catalina Lauf. I was born and raised in McHenry County in a small business household. Our family has been working with manufacturing companies for my entire lifetime. And actually, my sister and I created a company from our kitchen table called Begin Health in the children's nutraceutical space. And so I completely understand the struggles, especially not only from creating a business here in Illinois, but just the federal struggles that small to medium-sized businesses and startups are challenged with as government continues to become larger, more regulations, more tax burdens, and ultimately issues that are currently being faced right now, such as inflation and labor shortages, are all impacting not only all industries, but particularly manufacturing. You know, here being so close to Lake County, we did grow up with Illinois being such a manufacturing hub. And it's so sad to see just not only from the outsourcing manufacturing growing in different countries, but we must remain competitive here, again, not only to compete globally, but make sure that we are taking care of our own and we're allowing businesses to thrive. Illinois has some of the most regressive economic policies, and having companies here, I understand, is incredibly tough. But any way that I, as a member of Congress, can help relief on a federal level is really where I stand and what I want to be helpful for. Again, born and raised here in McHenry County, went to school in Ohio, worked in the private sector, worked in the technology space until I was ultimately I was a presidential appointee at the U.S. Department of Commerce under Secretary Wilbur Ross. And it was an incredible experience working in an administration that really valued pro-growth policies, Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, opportunity zones. These policies not only were so effective from a federal perspective, but they actually helps businesses here in Illinois. Again, being in a state that was incredibly regressive, those tax reliefs at the federal level were so important, and they did impact business owners. They did impact the American workforce. And we must ensure that we, again, are focusing on pro-growth policies. And it was an honor to be part of that shop during that time and to really see a lot of what was going on well in the country was coming from the Department of Commerce, and just the minds that were crafting this thoughtful legislation that, again, impacted people even here in the 11th district. And so that was incredible to see from that side in Washington, see how, people were able to come together and again, create thoughtful legislation to help our economy as a whole and our business owners, and again, the American workforce. And then from there, I saw the rise of these very far left progressives, particularly the younger millennials, and our districts changed. Lauren Underwood had then taken over a seat against Rainey Hultgren, and they just fundamentally do not understand, just given how they vote and the legislation and the current Democrats in Congress. It's to my belief that they fundamentally do not understand business. They don't understand the plight of the everyday American when they're passing legislation that is completely out of touch with the average American, the average business owner, when they're increasing taxes, when they're over-regulating, when they're trying to pass things like the Green New Deal. They don't understand the economic effects that is destroying the middle class. And we're now seeing all of that happening now under this current president's administration as well, with the help of his buddies in Congress. And so I've decided to run for office and not only defend, my home district, which I know is very pro-growth economically. Again, we have some of the greatest manufacturing companies right here in this district or the counties next door, agricultural, small business. We have many manufacturing companies down in DuPage County. And so I really want to take this seat back to make sure that our values of this district, the voices and the people of this district are being heard in a way that Bill Foster just has not heard. He has voted 100% with Nancy Pelosi, regardless of his business background and his experience in the manufacturing space. One must wonder why he continues to vote on over-regulating, over-taxing, and these policies that have created inflation, that have destroyed our workforce. So to me, that shows somebody who does not understand business, regardless of his background. So I'm honored to be here, and truly am a fighter. Again, an outsider. Never thought I would be in politics or run for office, rather. And I do feel I am very passionate about the people here, and I'm very passionate about the issues. And as a small business owner, co-founder to my sister's company, and we created, again, a children's product in the children's nutraceutical space. I understand what we need to change. And so I'm incredibly honored to be here and hope to earn your support in November.
Thank you so much for that information. It's very helpful in the background. And we're going to just tap on a couple of, we have in mind 4 different topics that we want to, you've sort of touched on them in your introductory, but let's just talk about them a little more, if you don't mind. Manufacturers of all sizes compete in a global economy, selling to U.S. customers and to the billions of consumers around the world. Pursuing policies that improve manufacturers' competitiveness and ability to reach new customers abroad will allow manufacturers in the U.S. to compete and win in the global market. How would you describe your position on international trade? That's how do we expand that? Your thoughts on that?
Yes. So first, I will say, from an ideology perspective, I do believe that we as free people and living in a free enterprise system should always have the ability to trade, buy and sell from anybody. And actually, two of our ingredients, I'll give you an example from our product that we make, are from Europe and South America. And if we didn't have those options, right, we wouldn't have a product. And so I think it's incredibly important that we do focus on deregulating and making sure that we are being competitive globally. But I will also say we must make sure that people are also held accountable when they should be. Unfortunately, countries like China have taken advantage of us for a long time. And I'll give you an example. When I was part of the Department of Commerce, there was a situation where a particular country was manipulating the weights of a fish export. And our American companies were basically overpaying for this product. And so how do we find not only a way to expand international trade and make sure that we are having these conversations and expansion and working with these different companies abroad, but also making sure that we are not being taken advantage of and that our companies are thriving and bringing back manufacturing here, making things more friendly here as well. So I think that there's a balance. Again, I believe that anybody should be able to buy and sell goods from whom they want, but making sure that we are remaining competitive by checks and balances.
You already mentioned the idea of what happened in the previous administration on taxes, but we wanted to, just kind of address that because we are understanding that there's talk of reversing those policies that really benefited manufacturers as far as their tax liabilities. There's talk that reversing those would remove the reforms that were made and increase taxes on those who pay the top individual income tax rates, which often snares in small and mid-sized manufacturers who function as pass-throughs. What are your thoughts on America's current tax policies, and do you support any changes?
We must keep them permanent. And again, I understand they did want to eliminate that. They wanted to completely dismantle all the good work that was happened in that administration from an economic perspective. And that's terrible. I have countless of examples from small business owners and manufacturers here that really were able to thrive because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. One area in particular for the last couple of years, and I'm sure the participants on here can note as well, have experienced this. There has been a labor shortage. A lot of these, unfortunately, some of our high school students or college students aren't pursuing vocational or trade careers. And we are seeing a downtick in the labor and the workforce, not only to add, some of the immigration laws have been pretty regressive as well. So when we can't find a workforce here, we're not even able to help people who want to work in the manufacturing space. That system is also broken. And so the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, for example, a particular manufacturing company actually here in the 11th district was able to reinvest in the company, not only to be more competitive, add more benefits, create an apprenticeship program with the local high school. And that really mattered. This wasn't just pennies, as Nancy Pelosi wants to say. This was really impacting small to medium-sized businesses the most. And when companies are able to reinvest because they're getting relief at a federal level, everybody is able to win. They're able to rent more or purchase more equipment. They're able to hire more. They're able to expand and innovate. And the more that we allow that, we take the chokehold off, the more people are able to thrive. And America wins when everybody is thriving. America wins when the middle class is thriving. America wins when small to medium-sized businesses are growing and innovating. And most importantly, this district wins because then we're bringing economic development here. We're allowing our area to continue to remain competitive despite what's going on in the state and frankly, despite what's going on in the country. So we must ensure that we do make those permanent, and that will be a priority once we take the House back and really look at the big picture and make sure that, again, our businesses are thriving and our workforce is thriving.
All right, you mentioned again, you're always one step ahead of me on this labor shortage and the need for the workforce to be developed. And one of the key competitive challenges that we have as manufacturers is access to a skilled workforce. Workforce policy should prioritize employer leadership and participation, and encourage more, especially in the post-secondary and the training programs. It should also enable more individuals to develop the skills needed to begin or advance in their career. How important is this to you? How would you see that the federal government could assist in this in any way? Is there just a mindset or a legislation that would be helpful?
I will say one thing we shouldn't do is allow the government to dictate these jobs. And ultimately, when you look at things like the Green New Deal or these bigger policies, ultimately the other side wants to control the means of production, and they want to make sure that their employees are government employees, right? So I believe that a lot of the times Democrat members don't prioritize innovation in the workforce, in the private sector, because they want those to be government jobs. And we need to make sure that we are doing our job, working from a public and private perspective, bridging that gap and encouraging high schools, for example, encouraging the trade shops, and encouraging people to want to be in a competitive living in a 21st century manufacturing job and role. And the only way to do that is by, again, encouraging, working with schools. I know a lot of, actually, the First Step Act, there was a part of, I'm not sure if it was just manufacturing, but giving people who deserve a second chance to be in the workforce, or even on the immigration front, making sure that we are doing our job in educating and training and changing that mindset that, look, people want to work. We want to make sure that they want to work in manufacturing. And, we are suffering from it as well, not only from a business side, but also manufacturing. It is incredibly hard to find talent. It's incredibly hard when you have the talks of raising minimum wage, for example. Also, that's, how are you supposed to remain competitive when the government is dictating what you should pay somebody? And you're then competing with so many different other entities, and you're not even able to bring in the workforce that you want. And you're not even able to make your mark or make your own decisions. And so we need to have the government out of it. We need to make sure that the only role that the government should play is to encourage and help these companies be more competitive, and also, again, encourage the educational aspect of it. I love when I hear some of these companies that are reinvesting in their own companies and creating these apprenticeship programs, and doing their job to innovate because there's a problem that needs to be solved. Unless we innovate, we're all, entrepreneurs and small business owners. Unless we innovate, we sink. And so I think that's great. We need to help them on an economic perspective, but then also be advocates for them as well on all these different other legislation. And one final thing, I'm not sure how many of you here have 1099 employees, or people who are not full-time employees. And one thing that we have seen with all this talk of unionizing and things like that, taking away 1099s, it's incredibly difficult for startups and small businesses to afford full-time employees. Not to mention, there are some full-time employees that only want to be working part-time in some of our businesses because of their own lives or their own small businesses. And so when the government, again, is trying to get involved in that decision, it will become more expensive, and it'll ultimately hurt already a hurting area, a pain point in our industry. And so all these different policies that are, again, regressive have direct impact on businesses as a whole.
Thank you. Yeah, and speaking of expenses, which workforce is one of the biggest, payroll is one of the biggest expenses for most businesses. Secondarily is the utilities. And so we are facing some real challenges in the cost of utilities and the source of power. And we just kind of would like to know your thought on what are the ways that we can deal with the challenges we have, the expense of energy, the access to energy, especially that manufacturers are depending upon to be solid, to be there, and to be accessible as much as possible. What do you think about that on the natural resources and the energy levels?
Yes. So the United States is, as we all know, one of the top still investing in nuclear. And so we want to make sure that, again, we are thinking about clean energy, but also making it more affordable as well. And so that's just an idea. I know that, things that we shouldn't be doing are investing, again, in things like the Green New Deal, where you have these massive policies being spent under the guise of reducing emissions or helping things to be more efficient. We have to come at it in a thoughtful way. This cannot just be spending taxpayer money or putting that burden on businesses for kind of these pet projects. We need to come in a balance of what is actually going to work and investing resources in that. So that's just one idea. And again, just making sure that we are allowing our companies to be free in this space too. And, but then not investing in things like the Green New Deal that are completely false in what they're trying to achieve. And it has a fancy name, but is not doing what we want it to achieve, right? So being very thoughtful about legislation on that end as well.
Well, thank you. We've covered some general areas that we wanted to touch on, and you're very helpful. I'm going to throw it back over to Rich, who has some questions from our TMA members. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fran and Catalina. Now it's time for questions and answers with TMA members. For those of you on your computers, or if you're using the mobile app, you can type your question and submit it through the Q&A tab on the Zoom control panel. I'll read the questions and ask our guests to answer them. In the meantime, I'll ask Catalina the first question that was pre-submitted by a TMA member. The question is, on the November ballot, voters will again be asked whether or not to amend the Constitution. This amendment, known as Amendment 1 or the Workers' Rights Amendment, would establish a constitutional right for employees to collectively bargain and would effectively ban right-to-work laws in Illinois. How will you be voting on this ballot question, and why have you chosen to vote that way? Catalina?
Yeah, I would vote no, and I'll tell you why. Again, it's incredibly difficult I'm completely against government, being involved in these relationships, not to say that there isn't value in some of the existing unions. And I know that there is some participation with some companies in bridging that gap, but we're not allowing, companies, especially the private sector, to find their own employees and to, again, get the government out. I will be voting no. And, it creates another barrier to an already very big pain point in what we're already experiencing.
Great. Thanks, Catalina. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, please type your question on the Q&A tab on the Zoom control panel. I'll read your question and ask Catalina to answer it. We do have another question submitted from a TMA member. The question is, discuss the manufacturing of your business at Begin Health. Where is the plant and how many workers does Begin Health employ? How many are in Illinois? Catalina?
Yes. So right now we have a few employees here in Illinois, actually, and our manufacturing is out of Utah currently, mainly because it was incredibly difficult to find a manufacturing company when we were first starting out that would take our volumes here in Illinois and actually specialize in what we were looking for, which is a children's nutraceutical product. Now that we're growing, we're able to explore, other ideas. So we work with from our packaging down to also all of the ingredients that are being put into our final product. But our warehouse and our day-to-day operations are here in Illinois in this district. And we're really proud for that. We're hopefully outgrowing it soon. Again, started from the kitchen table, have experienced a massive amount of growth month over month. We are venture backed now. We were just recently featured in Forbes. And, again, just the American dream story. And do hope to bring more here in Illinois and make sure that we can grow and hopefully everybody wins in that way as well. But yep, so Utah, and then we get ingredients from different countries that are FDA approved.
Great, thanks, Catalina. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, please type your question on the Q&A tab on the Zoom control panel. We do have another question submitted from a TMA member. The question is, other than hiring, one of the key challenges manufacturers face today is getting access to the materials we need to manufacture our products. Is there anything Congress can do to ease the supply chain disruptions that are impacting us? Catalina?
It's so hard because I can always tell you what they shouldn't be doing. And unfortunately, that's, what we're always kind of on the reactive side on these things. During COVID, there was actually a logistics company outside in San Francisco who offered to help the supply chain issues that were happening. There was a port issue out in the West Coast. Brilliant founder of a logistics company had a great solution, and it was completely ignored by the government and by this administration. And so I think first and foremost, we need to be that marriage between the private sector and government to solve these issues. I believe that the private sector solves them better. So we should be always using their counsel, always using their resources, and always empowering them to solve these issues instead of government shut down the businesses. Government was the reason why our businesses were shut down. It wasn't a pandemic. It was government who shut them down. Government hurt the supply chains. Government caused these issues. And then what do? 2 years later, they then start printing more money, voting yes on legislation. And again, everything then becomes more expensive, right? It's an entire ecosystem that just causes destruction and chaos. And that's exactly what we're experiencing now. I talk with some of our manufacturers in construction, any industry, even our farmers, everything is up by 20, 50%. And so things are not only more costly, but then you have the transportation issue as well. So you can't even get them transported, right? Your goods and your products. So we need to find solutions from the private sector. What can we be doing better? And how can we be relieving some of these issues by working with companies that can do it better than the government can? And, again, that's why I want to be a bit of an advocate in office, because I just fundamentally don't believe that government solves problems. I believe that the private sector does. We are a country of innovators and disruptors. It wasn't government that created the light bulb. And so we need to empower businesses to be able to ease that and to help that. And then also on the inflation side, things shouldn't be so expensive. We need to curb our spending, but then also back to the workforce. Our trucking industry is one of the worst that's impacted by the labor shortage. And so everything is just more expensive and not moving as effectively because of all these economic issues from a holistic perspective.
Great, thanks, Catalina. We do have another question from a TMA member. The question is, the Biden administration announced a change to the classification of independent contractors in the Fair Labor Standards Act. As a member of Congress, what legislation would you support to prevent this threat to small businesses and to 59 million independent contractors across the country? Catalina?
I am so happy that was asked, because this is just an area that just gets me so fired up. So I worked in the technology space. I was at Uber corporate side, and the majority of Uber were independent contractors. They were doing this because they had their own companies. They were moms, they were veterans. They were just doing this as it was the gig economy. And we saw the rise of the gig economy over the last 3 years, which ended up being brilliant. Everybody won in that sense. And people were happy with the way that they were there as independent contractors. And now all of a sudden you get the government involved, and they want to meddle in that relationship where nobody wanted their involvement in it. You ask again, most independent contractors, I would say 98% of them do not want to be full-time employees. That is a decision that they're making. The companies should be able to provide 1099 employment, and the employees should be able to choose whether or not they want to participate in that. Get the government out of that. Again, they just want to control. They want to have a say in what the workforce looks like, and they want employees eventually to be either unionized or even part of the government, I think is their final kind of vision there. And then you have to ask them for workforce. And so I completely disagree with that. I know the majority of contractors and the majority of businesses would also reject that. And as a small business owner that has 1099 employees as well, I know we wouldn't even be able to afford full-time employees. How are we supposed to grow? My sister and I work 80 hours a week, and how are we able to continue to grow if we don't have the relationships that we need, and independent contractors in this case? It would hurt companies like ours as well. And so very against that. And it's, again, so sad that they're not even taking the businesses or even the contractors' perspective. They're just coming in and wanting to pass legislation.
Great. Thanks, Catalina. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Catalina, do you have any closing thoughts for TMA members?
No, I'm just honored to be here. I am truly so inspired by the work that you all have done. I've had the opportunity to go visit so many businesses and meet many CEOs and founders. Some family owned, some new, and it really is you all who empower and are the reason why we have the economy that we do. And we must do everything that we can to help you as a member of Congress, everything that we can to support the innovation that comes with this vital industry, especially here in Illinois. Again, I was just reading Lake County was, one of the top manufacturing hubs of the country. And I would love to see a time and space where, Illinois 11 is just a manufacturing hub. And the only way that we can get there is by you all having an advocate on pro-growth economic policies. Again, my opponent has voted 100% with Nancy Pelosi, and just fundamentally doesn't understand the industry, doesn't understand the pain points. And we need to just get government out and making sure that you all can innovate, you all can develop what America needs, and also making sure that we can broaden awareness. It's amazing how people sometimes don't connect that a little piece of something is part of something so greater, whether it's the, piece in milkshakes for McDonald's or something, right? You all are doing incredible work, and you are part of such a larger ecosystem, and any way that we can advocate and support, I'm here for you.
Great. Thanks, Catalina. That will do it for today's virtual conversation. I want to thank Catalina Lauf for joining us today, along with TMA News Editor Fran Eaton for leading a wonderful discussion. And of course, we want to thank all of our TMA members who took the time out of their day to join us and become more educated on the candidates who will be on the November ballot. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye. Thanks for the time.
Take care.